RM Podcast FL. Yes, this is your favorite podcaster, Romina. Like it or not, I know I am your favorite. You have to call it out to the universe sometimes. That's what we talked about part one with Adi. And on part two, we're actually going to talk about from self-hate to self-love. So part one and part two, they kind of coordinate with one another. But before we do get started, Adi, I want to thank you so much again for being a part of the show. And I want to pass the mic to you to tell us about your books. I know you have two published books. Own It and One to Love, Always in Love. Tell us about this project.
Well, thanks for having me again. And as far as my books, so the first book, Own It, is a book I wish I had when I was a 17-year-old. The book is essentially very helpful to people at all stages of life because it really, it's a guide to how overcome the odds and figure out life. So from discovering who you are to how to manage relationships, how to manage money, pursue career you love, education, it covers all of that. And it's very much a guide, which means it's short and it has a lot of exercises and quick ways of kind of asking questions to find answers and own your life, right? Take responsibility for it. So that's the first one. The second book is a story of a Catholic priest, a friend of mine. He founded the first interfaith center in the United States in the 60s, and a very fascinating man. He passed away in the middle of us writing the book, but it covers his life and also the wisdom he's accumulated over the years, talks about love and why is it that once we fall in love, we can never go back. Once you say, I love you, you can never take the I love you back. And how does that actually appear in our life? And how do we benefit from it? There's some interesting stories in there, some great pictures about him, some of his friends communicating. This man also in his spare time found home for 6,500 orphans in 20 countries. So I actually ran his center years later, several decades after he founded it. And that's how we met and connected and decided to tell his story. He was an orphan. He really had an interesting journey, but the book goes beyond just his narrative. It touches on how do you live? How do you connect with find your God, find your spiritual life, whatever that means to you, and how do you, get the love and the friendships and everything else as part of your journey. So that's the second one. And that, they're very different, but I think they both, of course, I'm biased, but I think they're great reads.
I love it. You're like, I'm biased, but it's amazing. I mean, I say if it has my name on it, it's amazing. I don't know what you think. If you don't like it, then you're wrong. You have to have that self-confidence there. Maybe a little bit too much sometimes.
When the first book came out, and actually it was just last week, was the 6-year anniversary since Own It came out.
Congratulations.
And I read it every year, right? I reread it just to see, if I still believe all the same things. And it's actually a great read. And the more I get away from it, I realize how simple and basic, but actually fundamental lessons in it are, and very helpful to people. So I was actually a lot more concerned. I launched the book. I wrote it very fast. It went out, and it was launched in front of 150 people who paid to come to listen to me. And the book had actually a mistake on the cover, which was absolutely frustrating. My flight to get there to the conference got canceled. There was all these issues, and I was so nervous. I just wanted to give free copies. I'm like, is it going to be okay? Because you're a creator. When you create something, you put it out there, you're hoping.
It's like your brain baby. Yeah.
That's what it is. And did I forget something? What if it's not enough? But what happens is a lot of people since then have read the book and gave me so much positive feedback in terms of it's not what you expect it to be. It's actually, it goes both deep, but it's creative. And I tell stories from my life, like starting an ice cream shop when I was a kid, trying to make things happen. So it's a really good read. And as years go by, I'm more and more proud of it. The second one, people have said, people have cried reading it. They laughed. They were moved emotionally. It's beautifully written. Again, I'm biased, but I know how to write, and it's a good. I think it's enjoyable read, and it's different in the way, because you feel like you're transported an author is talking to you.
So I want to actually focus a little bit on the second one, because you said
Mm-hmm.
once in love, always in love, and you did mention that you and your partner for the book had the theory that once you fall in love, you cannot fall out. Which I have to say, I disagree with it. I think you can fall out of love. Why do you think you cannot fall out of love?
So I should clarify that. So you may not be with the person anymore that you were in love with.
Yeah.
And you may not want them in your life, but if you feel love within you and you've given it to someone else, you said, I love you. If it was truly authentic, you're not no longer, you can't say, well, now give me back what I gave you. The idea is to
I see what you're saying.
The idea is to live authentically and live a full life, so you're real. So you don't just say, oh, I love you, but you don't mean it. The idea is when you give to somebody something, it's you're actually really giving it to them. You may fall out of relationship, and you may, things happen, and sometimes bad ways, other times people just diverge, friendships, whatever it might be, things you give your life to, like career or certain jobs. Those things you may no longer want, your life has moved away from that, but the connection you had at that time, it was real. And if you think of your relationships, and I've had failed relationships, that's for sure. And I remember the times I said, I love you, it was real. I actually fully believe that. And if I've given it once, how can I go back and say, well, no, that wasn't real. If it was real once, it's always real.
I see what you're saying. I just think once you fall in love, you can't fall out because it translates or it converts to a different feeling. And if you had a horrible, breakup, then that love translates to hate, and then you grow from it, and you're like, it translates to neutral, or it translates to I want the best for you, but not necessarily with me. Or
well, let's expand that beyond romantic love. Once you fall in love with life,
yeah,
you don't go back out of it.
No, it's a good feeling.
It goes beyond, because the idea is if you connect with the divine, if you connect with the universe, you connect with things that are bigger than you, with love itself. That's where it's about. It's not an individual person. And in the book, we talk about, my friend Father Mothi was his name. He almost got married. He was engaged, and he saw his former fiance 50 years after they broke off. But his love was for God. He wanted to serve the church. He wanted to follow that path. He saw her 50 years later. She came to him. He was preaching, and she came to him after and said, hello, handsome. And they reconnected reconnected the moment they were where they were back in the day, 50 years prior. But the idea, it goes beyond.
That just gave me chills a little bit.
Yeah, it goes beyond transactional kind of stuff we experience a lot of times in relationships. The whole point and the message behind the book is that we feel these things within us, and we live our life in such a way that we're empty of all possibility by the time we end with it, that we love and live and give and contribute 100%, regardless of whether we're going to get hurt or not. Whether it's going to work or not, we don't know. But what we can do is give it our all at the time. So that's really, so it's a lot like a bigger, deeper message.
Do you believe being in love and loving something are two different things? Like loving your career and being in love with your career. Because like, for instance, what I do right now, I'm in love with it because I can spend hours and, be tired, but I'll be okay. Yeah. But loving it would be like, I love it because it gives me good money, but limited hours kind of thing. That's how I look at it. And we can talk about relationships or careers or just life in general. Do you think those two things are different too?
So I think they're different. I think in love grows to love. And actually, I have changed a bit of my philosophy in terms of falling in love with something. I like the idea of growing in love. Because fall means you lost yourself a bit. It means you lost your balance. It means you may get hurt as you're falling. The thing with that is there's a thrill. There's the thrill of, when you're an adolescent and you have a crush and you think you're falling in love and all that. It's delightful. However, as we age and we get wiser and we want to live richer lives, I like the idea you grow in it. So if you have a career and if you're not growing in more love with it, like, so you're, loving it more, then the question is, well, what do you need to do to achieve that greater love? So the idea of growing in love, that's why you see some great couples 50 years later, either they're so like far apart and they're just there coexisting, or you saw them that they just grew over time in their connection with each other. And so that would be my definition. I tend to stay away from, oh, I'm in love with this, because I think that has a fleeting nature unless it becomes the next level, right? It becomes actually love.
Yeah, and before I jump to the question, because I do want to talk a little bit about your growth from, in the 1990s in Balkan, we did have some wars. Not a lot of people think it's in 1950s, but no, guys, it's 1990s. Like, we both experienced that. But I did want to add just one more thing towards in love and falling in love. I feel like some people, well, how I look at it is, once you are so confident in yourself and you just have so much positivity, you can tell somebody you love them, but not necessarily like commit your life or commit your whole being into something. And I just find it hard, like, I just find it a little sad that some people sometimes are hesitant to say I love you, or I love my job, or I love this, because they feel like they're letting their guard down, which we talked about, being vulnerable and letting your guard down on the first episode, you guys, so you should definitely listen to that. But I think the more love you give, also the more love you receive, because you open that door.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%. It's when you are vulnerable, like we talked in the first episode, but you're also giving, when you're loving, that's going to come back to you, because any emotion we experience, if it's anger, it lives with us, it's burning us. If it's love, it lives with us and we're experiencing it. So if you want a life full of love, you got to feel that love within and share it freely. And it doesn't mean that things are not going to change in life. You're going to have different priorities, move on from things. I mean, think of food. There are certain things you love to eat back in the day, but you no longer do. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have loved it at that time, because life could happen and, I don't know, your priorities change. You give it your all.
Yeah. Give it your all, and you'll always see, results in it. Don't give just tiny percent, because you'll see tiny change, or you won't even notice it. Just saying. Well, let's talk a little bit. So and we're talking about love, but we're going to talk about from self-hate to self-love. And on the very first conversation that we talked together, we kind of can relate. In the 1990s, we did have the wars in Balkan, unfortunately. And I shared with you how I was like, sometimes I have like flashbacks, and you shared how you've experienced that, so we can kind of, relate to one another there. But I wanted to, because you're also a life coach, I wanted to talk to you for people that necessarily have like drama at a young childhood. What can they do to reprogram their brain, or to let that part of their life go? If you want to share your personal experience, how did you, or do you still have it in you, and how do you manage it so it doesn't take your whole being, but minimize it?
So there's a couple of things about that. So the first part is, my earliest memory is a bomb exploding outside of our window. I didn't understand at that time. You're a kid and you see just this happens and you live with it. But in retrospect, I was asking a question: why would somebody want to kill me? What's wrong with me? I didn't do anything.
Yeah.
So you have those experiences, and that's an extreme experience. But the trauma experiences we have as kids, they don't have to be significant. They don't have to be major. In fact, it's because we think they have to be major that many of us don't handle our
small ones,
complex PTSD, or just regular PTSD, right? We don't address it because, just like I didn't. When I came here, I went to college. I was in college and I had a professor who wanted me to write about the Balkan Wars, disintegration of the former Yugoslavia and all these things. And I was like, no, I'm going to write about AIDS situation in Africa, because I wasn't going to touch that, because I didn't think it was a big deal. She was very insistent, because she thought I had a very unique perspective, having grown up there and, studying the topic of, politics and identities and stuff. So I actually got into it. And as I started researching, I would have flashbacks from that. But then I still didn't think much of it. I was like, okay, well, it's just memories. Until I realized that some of those fears and rejections and experiences built me the way I am. And I had to work through it because I wanted a different life. And so that comes to the second part of reprogramming, is that we get, like we talked in the last episode, we get programmed in the first 7 years, 90% of who we are. And so to reprogram is you essentially look at your life and you say, what else is there? How do I get to know myself, figure out what really matters to me, figure out my purpose, my passions, my values, and create a vision for my life that is so compelling, that pulls me, that I have to do it, not just live a life reactionary. Okay, I have to go get a job so I can pay my bills. There's so much more that we can do with our lives if we take the time to figure out what that is, and then figure out what are the deeper limitations that we place upon ourselves, and how to move from that self-hate, or people struggle sometimes when I say self-hate, because they're like, well, I don't hate myself, but stuff like that, to actually self-love and recognizing that we're worthy of goodness. We are worthy of to live a life we love. And so that leads to my second part, which is I tried to satisfy the void within for years. So we talked about it. I came here, no money. I went, got this education, did all these things, landed opportunities, connected with people. But in fact, it was at the time I was running an organization, raised money. Mayor of the city knew me by the first name. I was very much, up and coming future leader. But internally, I felt miserable. And my relationship had collapsed. I was overweight. I was feeling lethargic. I just was feeling just bad. And then I found myself at the floor of my apartment with a bottle of Jack Daniels, recognizing that I actually hated myself. So the external stuff did not lead to success, did not lead to happiness, did not lead to self-love. They never do. That's why you have so many situations where people do all the right things they're supposed to, and then they encounter a moment in their life, whether you call it midlife crisis or whatever, where they get stuck, look back and like, what the hell have I done? This is not who I am or what I really want. And that's why so many people, there's this disruptions in life. And then for many people, there's quiet desperation. About 70+% of Americans report being unsatisfied with their lives. And a lot of it has to do because they're not taking the time to dig deeper. That day in my apartment, I realized I hated myself, and I wasn't sugarcoating it. I wasn't trying to avoid it. I asked myself, okay, I have two choices, because I didn't want to live with self-hate. I had choices. I had a choice of ending it all, which I contemplated. And the second part was changing it. Well, I was way too curious about my life, thankfully. And I wanted to see how it, what happens with it and how I can make the difference and, live it out. So I was like, well, how do you go from self-hate to self-love? And well, before you love something, you have to like it. And before you like it, you have to think it's good. And so I asked myself whether I'm fundamentally good with all the flaws, with all the mistakes I've made, with all the things I wish were different, different situation, different upbringing, different relationships, different me, the way I look, feel, whatever. But then that fundamental goodness occurred to me that the flower, a plant, is a plant. The plant doesn't try to be good. The plant just is. The universe doesn't try. The universe just is. There's no external validation that is necessary to recognize that fundamental goodness. And so I decided, well, I don't necessarily feel this right now, but I'm going to decide that I am fundamentally good, because I literally don't have an argument that I'm not. Mm-hmm. There's no argument against it intellectually at the time. And I was going to build on it by tying every decision and every day I live to that fundamental goodness. So if I believe I'm fundamentally good, that means I deserve good things. That means if somebody's being mean to me or I'm in toxic situations, I'm going to remove myself. That means I should take care of myself. So I lost about, 50+ pounds after that. And I wasn't dieting. I just decided to take care of myself. So instead of going to McDonald's, I actually made my own food. So I'm like, I am deserving of this. I actually had a license plate too on my car, so I could daily be reminded that I am good. It said I am good on it. So I kind of started with that, and then that slowly became a belief. And that belief is so strong today that I don't know what I need to do or whatever happens in the world, no one can convince me that I'm not fundamentally good. Will I make mistakes? Yes. But that fundamental goodness it's like a foundation for a house. You build on it.
Solid foundation.
I figured out that's much easier than to change. So I figured out things I like about myself and then things I don't. But when you don't think you are a bad person for having certain traits you don't like, it's much easier to change them. So I change. To this day, I change constantly things I don't like about myself or what I'm doing, how I'm doing it. So I change that. And that means I'm liking and I'm doing the things and living in a way that I'm liking and liking myself more and more. That leads to then self-love. And then because you learn to appreciate yourself, because again, this something, me, is good, which means I can like it, which means I can love it. That changes the whole perspective to the sense of self-worth and being good enough, and also to relationships and what you put up with, what you don't, to the career dreams you follow, to creating boundaries, to having the guts to go for the things that really matter to you. Even if you might fail, it doesn't matter. You believe you're worthy to give it a shot. And so the whole dynamic changes once you reach that point. Of course, you have to have a drink with your demons. You have to face your, this is not as simple as I'm describing it. You have to work on it, and you have to face subconscious. You have to face programming, things like that, in order to rewire it, in order to change it.
Yeah, you do have to have a drink with the demon. That's for sure. I have not shared that myself, but yeah, I had my break point too, that I ended up in a hospital with alcohol poisoning, and that wake up call. And first off, I want to thank you for sharing the story. I can partially relate to it at some point, because the last 5 years I've been able to go from, because I was mad with the world myself, and I just was mad with God and just everybody, from A to Z. But once you start building it, and once you start, in order to build, like, I'm just going to make a comparison. In order to build a new skyscraper, you have to demolish the building that is in it. Yep. And you demolish it and you start from scratch. And rock bottom is the best solid foundation you can find. Yep. And you just build your castle with bricks instead of sand. What you had before might be a sand castle, but now you just build it with bricks.
And you build it. That's key. You build it for yourself. You own it, good, bad, and otherwise. And that's the thing. I mean, I love that you have to lose yourself in order to find yourself. So when people tell me I'm confused about my life, I'm like, that's great. That means the change is already happening. Because the biggest problem is when people are so certain that from the outside, you're looking at them and you're thinking, you are on a wrong path. You're going to hit the wall and it's not going to be pretty. But people don't see it. So that idea of you have to lose yourself to really figure out who the hell you are. Truly.
Well, even if you're not understood, I just tell people I'm special edition, so you're never going to fully understand it.
And that's the thing. It's not up to others. And the thing is, we have to understand and accept ourselves. Whether others do or not, you can't control that.
Yeah.
That's entirely up to them, not us.
So I know we're talking about the inner battle and the inner growth. But as a person that loves helping others, both me and you specifically, you devote your life to it. What can we learn? Because I understand externally, sometimes you have to filtrate those sounds, or you have to, not really listen to it and just look what you want. But how can we be a good support system for somebody that might be going through change? Like, it might be a family member, a friend, or a coworker, or a loved one. How can we be a good support system, even though we don't understand somebody 100% what they're going through? Mm-hmm. What type of questions or what kind of conversation we can have to keep that open-mindedness, to just even for a second make him feel like he or she's listened, and they're understood.
Mm-hmm. So there's I don't know if you've ever heard of the platinum rule. So there's the golden rule: treat others as you want to be treated, and then there's a platinum rule that says treat others as they want or need to be treated. And so when people are going through stuff, it's not about me to tell them unless they ask me, right? But it's not up to me to tell them how to live, what to do. My job, if I want to be supportive, is to understand what they need by asking, by seeking to understand, by connecting, by sometimes just being there. You don't have to do anything, because our instinct, I gotta do something. That's more about us than the person needing something from us. We have to respect wherever the people are, and whatever their needs are, ask them and actually listen. Watch for our biases, right? Watch for the things we process ourselves and want to do, because a lot of that is, I want to help. That becomes about me, not the person I actually want to help. So is it really helping? So the support, I think, it's connecting with the person, treating them the way they need to be treated. And that empathy we talked about in the last episode is, we might not understand what people are going through specifically, But what we can understand is the anguish or the confusion or the pain or the excitement, euphoria, whatever it is they're experiencing. We can connect with the emotion that their experience is giving them. We may not have the same experience, but we have had those emotions. And so if we tap into it, that's where empathy lives. We get it. People are going through it. And then of course, when it gets, we feel maybe sometimes, oh my God, I'm doing this too much and whatnot. We just recall that it's not, our job is to be supportive, and supportive means being there without trying to solve anything unless asked to do so.
Yeah. But I'm also intrigued, how would this work in a collective culture like it is in the Balkan area or Middle East, or that our territory, and compared to America, that it's more an individualism. My foreign moment here, guys. Individualistic culture. 10 points, Romina. Said it. Got it. Whenever we have like a collective culture, like a very family oriented, sometimes we feel like as we cannot breathe to take a second and actually, rebuild ourselves, because everybody's asking you why, what, when, who, 100 questions. I tell my mom sometimes, you ask 101 questions in a second. So how can those people from those collective cultures actually need to do to even start small, so it's not like a big drastic change?
So it starts with awareness. So you recognize the distinction between between the person and everybody around. There's a gap. A lot of the communal societies, there's a lot of codependence instead of interdependence, but that's not healthy, right? That's why you see a lot of unhealthy dependencies that happen. And they may not be bad inherently, but they do cause people to feel suffocated or feel like their voice isn't heard. So a way out of that is you recognize that we are our own being, and how can we create a bit of a gap, a bit of a space between us and others. So if people give us feedback, we, instead of taking it to heart, whether it be good or bad, we wonder whether they understand us to give us that feedback. Where is this feedback coming from? So for example, my dad, he wanted me to be an engineer. He still does, right? Or something. He wants me to get a regular job, have a 9 to 5 stability, and for many years I was like, he's not supportive of me. No, actually that was his expression of love. He cared because he was an entrepreneur. His dad was an entrepreneur. We have a generational thing, but what he saw the war, he saw losing things, he saw losing everything. So he wants me to be safe and taken care of. When I understood that, it allowed me to say, I appreciate that. I respect that's where you come from, but that's not my path. I get to choose my own. And this can be big stuff or small stuff. The dynamic is the same. And so that's where it starts. In my book, Own It, I talk about relationship circles. That's the other thing, where you have, 3 inner circles that are all about trust and connection, people that really understand you, and then 3 outer circles that's pretty much everybody else. In those core circles, people around you, you focus and surround yourself with the people that actually understand your true self. But before you can know the true self, you see the distinction between performative stuff, so doing things for the community because that you're expected to do that, versus what really matters to you. As you focus, as you see the gap between the two, and then you focus on yourself, you choose yourself on small stuff. Over time, you grow it's like muscles. Over time, you grow in your confidence, and you find ways to create boundaries, find ways to pursue your own path that is unique to you, that is authentic to you. It might not be supported by community, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't pursue it. So it starts with small stuff. It could be as much as, when you want to wake up in the morning, or what are you eating, or how you want to do something, how you want to spend your holiday. Any of those things can be tools to say, okay, we build with small stuff.
I love everything you said, and I want to specifically focus a little bit on your dad, for instance, that he wanted you to go for engineering because that's his way of showing love, and that's his way that he thinks your life will be sad and not have to worry about it. Because I feel like sometimes in our inner circle, I feel like we misunderstand our friends, family, or loved ones, because they're based on their perception and their vision, this is what's right.
Right.
And that might be wrong for you, but I feel as we have to have an open mindset, which is not easy to have sometimes, and have sit downs and deeper question why they feel the way they feel. So this way we can understand that no, they're not really mad at you. They're just too worried about you, especially when it comes to parents.
Hmm. The thing about that is that there has to be a line, right? There has to be a line in the sand, if you will, where the boundaries, right? It's not my job to understand where my dad is coming from or to manage his emotions. And that's not my responsibility, especially child to parent dynamic. That should never go that way. It's the job of a parent is to take care of the kid, not the other way around, in terms of not physically speaking, but like emotionally, right? Because then there's emotional issues that happen. So we choose to understand in order to make sense of our journey. So if something bothers you, the idea wasn't because my dad needed understanding where he comes from. The idea was for me to understand so I don't carry it as a burden or
Yeah.
disapproval.
And that's what I mean by it, because sometimes we feel like we're mad or we have an anger towards something,
Yeah.
but I feel like it would give us ourselves like an inner peace and better understand where somebody else is coming from once we get to the root of it, which like we said on the first episode, you kind of just go straight for the root of the issue.
Yep.
But I think it's very important because it helps us a lot kind of see things from a better perspective and be open-minded.
Yep. And a lot of this stuff is awareness, right? So understanding where the feedback is coming from, understanding the dynamic, understanding how we really feel. So even anger, right? Anger can be a great motivator, can be a great teacher. It's just what we do with it. If the anger is just expressive towards others or situations, that's not constructive. But how can we take any emotion, whether it be sadness, anxiety, anger, or happiness, joy, as an educator, right? It's our body, it's our higher self giving us a sign. So we take that sign and then we learn from it. And I went from this feeling of, oh, I'm not adequate, even though I'm doing all these things, I did so much, to not really being bothered by it because I recognize I have the inner satisfaction of what I'm doing. And that's okay.
Do you ever catch yourself thinking like, oh, 20-year-old Adi would have freaked out if this happened, but now you're like, oh, I got this. Like, this is easy peasy. Do you ever catch yourself and kind of compare yourself, how you've been before and how you are now?
Yes, of course. Of course, there were moments of strength, right? Where you recognize, oh, this is not bothering me as much, or this is how I would approach it, including moments of what became more important to me or how I'm perceiving things. And that's sign of growth, right? That's sign that you've transformed into someone else, especially if less things bother you than they used to.
And the reason why I actually asked that question is like we talked earlier, my dad unfortunately had tumors, so he had to have surgery. So I actually posted Albanians. Here we go, guys. Close culture. I posted on Facebook, I said, it sucks, but I'm actually glad it's happening to my family because we are strong enough to handle such a situation with his surgery and his recovery. If it had another family, it might have demolished them emotionally and financially even worse. And the response that I got, which I had to delete it, I said, this is too much. I'm trying to give positivity here, trying to see like if something bad happens, try to look at it from a good point of view.
Mm-hmm.
What ended up happening is, oh, so you're okay with bad things happening to your family and you just pray for it and all this craziness. And I was like, no, once you recognize that strength that you're like, I'm glad it's happening to me, I can handle it. If it happened to somebody else, it would demolish them, it would ruin them. And I feel like sometimes they have to switch the mindset if something bad happens to us, because if we think of it like that, I don't know why, but I found this like inner strength even more. And I was like, ooh, this throwing me this. I got it. I'm going to mic drop it. I got this thing. But it takes a lot to get there. It's not overnight.
It requires a lot of, it requires in that, wrestling with that pain, because the pain makes us stronger, right? And so when you go through a lot of those things, you have the certain perspectives. I mean, we talked about it, right? Not the same, of course, but my dog, he had an emergency surgery.
Yeah, it ended up happening the same time. We actually, this interview is rescheduled, you guys, because it just happened the same time.
Yeah, that was so, crazy. But when it happened, it was an emergency. And they said, you can pay a lot of money for this surgery and we can open him up and he may have all this cancer inside and whatnot. And, in my mind, that's where I caught myself, and I knew where my values stood. And my values were very clear on I will do whatever I can to prolong and save his life. But the other value was I will also do whatever is the best for him, not whatever I need in that situation. It's
Yeah.
about caring for, beyond having that perspective. So your example in the comments you received, comments like that, this is where, I talk about how I really should do stand-up, because my response to that would have been, yes, exactly. I pray every single day the bad things will happen to my family. I mean, comments like that are so toxic, but they stem from a person projecting.
I
their
deleted it
own.
because my family was freaking out, and I was like, you know what, you guys think I'm weird, so I'm just gonna delete it. You guys not even
Right.
understanding me too.
And that happens, and sometimes it doesn't, it's like it's not worth it, right? But that's you see those moments, and a crisis is what shows us what we're made out of, right? When we have a crisis, how quickly do you respond? How does it feel? And are you able to kind of stay grounded even when it's hurting?
That is so true. Oh my goodness. The second episode, you guys, the first episode, second episode, I mean, we're getting to the roots of it. We can talk about this all day, but I definitely don't want to overload you guys. I think this is amazing information. But before we do jump to the two last questions, which we'll always know what they are, Adi, if somebody is like, I feel like I'm a positive person, but sometimes I'm negative, like I'm just kind of in between. Maybe like a one thing a day that I can do, like, I don't know, like journal or just reach out to somebody. Would it be like a first step you'd suggest to someone to start slowly, looking into that self-love perspective instead
Mm-hmm.
when they're feeling in the middle?
Mm-hmm. So there's tools like I love morning pages, or I call it a brain valve. So when you feel overwhelmed and there's so many different thoughts going on, grab three pieces of paper, sheets of paper, and just in handwrite whatever comes to your mind. So whether it be, oh, my neck hurts, to it's gloomy outside, to whatever it might be, write it all out, get it out. So really what it is, the brain, it's like a bandwidth in a computer, right? The brain gets overwhelmed, and that tends to cause that discomfort and pain, which then leads to negativity and fear. So when you get some stuff out, you get a bit more perspective. So I'm a big believer in that, including doing it when you don't feel bad, just kind of getting it out. That gives you clarity. The other thing is observe and doubt your doubts. So if you're having a doubt about something, you doubt the doubt. Or if you're you're wondering about something, ask, is what I'm thinking really true? And that's because the thoughts are designed, right, they just happen. We have all kinds of thoughts every single day. And there's a whole process of how our brain works to grab certain ones. And generally, we grab the ones we already know. So that's a confirmation bias, right? We look for things we already know. So if you have a moment where you're trying to be positive, but you're having these consistent thoughts, that's usually because brain is just looking for them, and they seem real and valid because our brain recognizes them, not because they're true. So you disrupt that by asking, well, is this really true? Where is this coming from? So that you seek to understand what's driving this. I would also strongly encourage people to not just look at the duality of good and bad, positive, negative, but use terminology like constructive. And is this serving me? Is this serving my higher good? So let's say you encounter a day when my dog, we were waiting results for biopsy, and thankfully everything was great, but I could catch myself, my anxiety was through the roof. Like I was having that flight or fight response, second shoe's gonna drop. I wanted to do something. I wanted to just, do something with the situation. And then I would ask myself, well, is this serving me? I can't do anything, I'm waiting. All I can do is focus what's in front of me. This is where knowing your purpose helps. I realize this working with my clients, I would totally go into the zone. I wouldn't think about anything because I'm very present with them. But you ask yourself, is this helpful? Whether it seems real or not, is it really helpful to me? Why am I suffering? Do I like this? Am I addicted to pain? Lots of people are. So is this what I want? Or do I want to not feel this? And so anytime we start asking those questions, we immediately start creating it's like a stool with three legs. We're hitting the legs. We're creating wobbly, and they don't have as much strength. And that's how you transform.
I love it. And I love how you say doubt your doubts. I actually wrote that down. Whenever I doubt myself, I typically If I have moments, because I cry when I'm angry, when I'm really angry, I do that. But in myself, I'm like, I'm gonna cry, let the sad tears out, leave space for good tears. I say that to my head, or I'll just be like, think Romina, shut up, think Romina, think Romina, think Romina. Like I just yell in my own head. But I love the doubt your doubts. I actually wrote it down and I'm gonna put it on my board here because that's so true though. Sometimes we're doubting ourselves, but then we can just, use extra ammo for our doubts and be like, no, I'm going to doubt you. You're out of the picture now.
And it's one of those things when you talk about, being fair. So if we're going to be doubt ourselves, well, we got to be encouraging to ourselves too, if we care about fairness, right?
Yeah.
We have to be equal opportunity doubter and equal opportunity, everything we do. So that's asking those questions. So disrupting the brain, instead of telling ourselves, asking questions that give you like confuse you a bit, that's actually good, because the brain then stops that rhythm of anger, or even, and the other thing is sitting with your emotions. One of the best things you can do is, okay, I'm burning, I'm anger, it's like choking me, I'm so angry. Okay, well, I'm just gonna not do anything about it. I'm just gonna sit with this emotion. Any emotion lasts 90 seconds. It's our narrative about it that it expands it and makes it so much bigger. So if you encounter anger, feel the anger, don't avoid it. The reason why it gets bigger and people act out is because they don't actually process it. So when the emotion goes through us, it's gone. It doesn't matter which emotion.
They hold into, it doesn't process correctly. So it's footprints, and then you just drag it along.
Yep. And there's the emotional hijacking kind of stuff, especially happens with, the trauma experiences. But like you're walking down the street and you have a sensation that triggers you. You acknowledge the sensation and you let it pass, as opposed to freaking out or rebelling against it.
I love it. And I know you guys have a lot more questions for Adi. I definitely suggest you to go ahead and connect with him. Where can people connect with you besides LinkedIn and your website, right?
Yes. So I'm on social media, so Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to send a message, email. I'm going to create some, there are going to be some freebies for you guys. If you go to adiredzic.com/Romina, you're going to get some freebies. How do you reach success in life? A few keys that I'm going to give you. I'm also going to give you a discount for my book, and I'm going to give you a discount for my coaching services. So
you guys are getting spoiled, audience. Do you hear all that? I'm just saying.
This is the problem when you're driven by impact and changing people's lives. You just want to give and do. And I'm on this mission, especially right now with COVID and people and all the other craziness. So many people struggling. I'm on this mission to demonstrate that obstacle is the way. Times of crisis are an amazing opportunities for transformation. And so I want to reach out to people and say, hey, reach out to me. Let's figure your life out. Let's figure out your business. Let's see how do we turn this disadvantage into advantage. Yep. So adiredzic.com is the great spot. LinkedIn as well. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn. Email is there as well. Social media, if you like pictures of my dog and some inspirational quotes, they're on there. Awesome. And of course, I have a newsletter that comes with a website. People can sign up, and every week I send a little bit of something I'm thinking about that week.
Nice. And I'll go ahead and attach all that information on the show notes, you guys, because I know sometimes you can be lazy or you're driving. So if you cannot type it out, just it's a click away. I mean, I don't know how much easier you can get from that. A click away. Do you guys connect LinkedIn? Do you guys even have LinkedIn? If you don't, I don't know what you're doing. Open a LinkedIn. Reach out to somebody or ask me a question. I'll help you. LinkedIn is an amazing platform, just saying. I wish they could pay me for this commercial, but no. Anyways. What is a new and exciting project that you're working towards? I know you have a lot in your plate because you cannot just sit in one place, knowing you.
No, I can't. So I think the exciting project is I'm writing my third book, and it's more in the line of leadership and how to build organizations that embrace innovation and entrepreneurship. There's a clear path to it. We've seen organizations that foster that kind of mentality actually thrive, whether it be small startups or large organizations. Places like Google and Apple embraced their way of thinking, and that's why they've been successful. So that's my big project. I call it Entreployment. It's how do you get people to feel like they own part of the business. So they're entrepreneurs, but they have the security of a paycheck and of structure that's already in place. So
that's really a great idea. I can think of so many people that can benefit from it. That's a really, really great idea because it empowers you within what you're doing. And I like that. I love that idea.
I'm glad. And the thing is with organizations, right? So many, and we didn't talk much about it, but I do help, businesses. And one of the things that happens a lot, people get so caught up with a single bottom line, so making money. But if you don't know what your why is, and if you don't dig deeper, you cannot create a robust organization. So I brought up Apple. They're driven with the same mission that Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak had in the 70s in a dorm room at Berkeley. They're the same. They have the same drive today, which is why it's allowed them to grow.
I'm looking around because that's actually explained on the Simon book, Start with the Why. They have the same.
Yep.
I'm looking. I don't know where I put the book. I just finished it. It's probably there. But yeah, starts with the why. That's absolutely super, super important. Once you know that fundamental why, it pushes you more.
And the thing is, if you don't know the fundamental why, you can't create an authentic vision. And if you don't create an authentic vision, you can be pulled by it. So everything seems so heavy. Everything seems extra work. And this includes organizations. When you have a lot of issues within your business, you're tripping over yourselves, processes are not right, you're not hiring the right people. That happens because it's very reactionary. It's not deliberate and clear. Once you have that, it's much easier to thrive. And so I figured, I wrote this blog post a while about entreployment, and I'm like, well, I can take this and, just make into the next book.
You should actually just start a podcast too.
I've heard that before. People have said this.
I feel like we have so much to talk about. We can continue talking for days, but I feel like I would absolutely love to hear your podcast. It would be like my weekly dosage of, go get it and kick ass. Like just let's get stuff done. That's what I feel like.
Thank you. It's very likely that it's going to happen, and
I'm here if you need help. I've been through this for a minute, so absolutely, I would love to see on the podcast platform. Would be super successful too. And Adi, we've come at the end of the interview, but I cannot, skip this without asking my favorite question. What is your personal definition of success?
Following my bliss. So doing as much as I can of what I love every single day. And if I'm not, and I always tell people, even coaching, I love what I do. The day I don't want to do, I don't feel like brings me joy, I don't love it anymore, I will do something else.
Love it. That's inner happiness, and that is, absolutely. Self-love at the end of the conversation.
Right, it's self-love, and then it flows from that, right? It's having the courage to do what makes you happy. And if you're not, right, that's not success. And everything else flows from that. So money, opportunities, all of those things, they all happen, but there has to be more than that. It has to be deeper. So that way, on a day when you're not maybe making as much, you can still feel great about yourself and about your life.
Love it. And guys, make sure to also check in the first part. I know I've said this a couple of times. This interview is split into two parts. The first part, it was launched on October 13th. The second part, October 15th, which is today. So make sure you follow both of them. Connect with Adi. Go ahead and tell him Romina sent you. And if you're from the Balkan area and some of these questions were specifically built for you guys, you're more than welcome. So definitely feel free to connect with both of us. Adi, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. And you guys make sure to tune in every Tuesday for awesome episodes, and maybe every Thursday for awesome episodes again with two parts this time, just like this one. Thank you guys. Have a good one.